Welcome to our Innovation Insights Google Hangout series. I am Gretchen Hoffman, Vice President of Marketing at Brightidea. We're the leader in crowdsourcing innovation management software. And today we are very, very excited to have Matt Greeley, our fearless CEO at Brightidea, who's a man who knows about everything. So remember, the theme here is Ask Me Anything, right? The AMA. And I will tell you, every time I talk to him, I learn new vocabulary, and I know that he is the person I want on my Trivial Pursuit team. So please do jump in and ask anything. And just before we get started, I want to make sure folks are aware, we do have people manning us here on social. So we're using hashtag today innovation and hashtag leadership. And our handle on Twitter is at BrightIdeaHQ. So you're welcome to submit your questions there. Or as you likely should be able to see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A area. We already have some questions that have come in. Thank you for that. Please do not be shy. Be sure to put your questions in. If we have any qualifying questions, we'll let you know. Listen in for your answers and any other further questions we may have to make sure that we're fully answering your questions. So with that, what I'd love to do to go ahead and get started is ask Matt to just take a moment and share with us something about himself that frankly you couldn't Google. I mean, every time I talk to Matt, I find out a little more about something and find out what a great person he is and a great leader of the company, and would love for you yourselves to hear a little bit more about him. So Matt, let's start out with, I'm asking the first question, all right? And then we'll turn it over to everybody else's, which is, what can you tell us about you that nobody could Google, that could be the secret of those people listening in? And maybe, why are you passionate about innovation? How you got into this?
Okay. So something that you can't Google about me is I'm actually really passionate about words and poetry. And my parents tell me that I taught myself to read preschool, basically. I don't know how that happened, but it's they claim that's true. And since that time, I've learned poems, and they've just stuck with me, my whole life. So I can recite Shakespeare soliloquies, and I can recite Robert Frost poems and stuff like that. I still remember when I read Hop on Pop when I was a young child. I'm just really passionate about words and how they structure meaning. And I think, poetry is sort of the highest form of that.
Okay, great. And so what we're going to do is, as we're hearing more on innovation, we're also going to remind people you can ask about anything. One question I will ask the person who had submitted for one point of clarification before I give it to Matt is, there's one question here about what are the best practices. Ashok, I believe you had submitted this for performance appraisal for an SMB. If you can just clarify, send in another question, clarify, are you referring specific to innovation or what area you'd like covered? And then I'll be sure and ask that question. Okay, so one of the questions here that we do have, Matt, that I'd love to ask is from Raluca, and it is, what is your opinion regarding the new paradigm of accelerating disruptive innovation?
Sure. Well, there's actually a lot to that question, so I'll sort of expound upon it. The first off is, I think some people use disruptive innovation. There's sort of a term of art form of that, and then there's sort of a general use form of that. So, Clay Christensen wrote this book, The Innovator's Dilemma, and in it he introduced this theory of disruptive innovation. And the theory of disruptive innovation is really about when a new entrant comes into a market, and they basically, through the use of new technology, they can offer the same benefits to a much larger pool of people. So if you think about the original days of photography, you had a professional photographer who knew how to mix the chemicals and set up the tripod and all this other stuff. Since that time, we had canned film, and that broadened the universe of photographers. And now we have digital technology, digital photographs, and that's even broadened it still. I saw a recent stat this week that there's going to be more digital photographs taken this year than were ever taken on film. So disruptive innovation is in Clay Christensen's form has a very specific meaning that you're coming in sort of underneath with a lower cost new technology offering that sort of expands the pool, and then eventually it tends to take over the existing market too. So we're now seeing digital SLR cameras and et cetera. So the more colloquial definition of disruptive innovation is when like a kid being disruptive in class. He zips a paper airplane and he's being disruptive, and of course innovation can be disruptive in that sense. If you're a taxi driver in New York City or Las Vegas, you certainly think that Uber is being disruptive to your lifestyle, to your business, but they're not necessarily it's not necessarily disruptive innovation in Clay Christensen's form. So but I think there's more to the question than that. But just to lay that out as context, I think are we seeing accelerating innovation? I definitely think we are. I mean, if you look at adoption curves for new technologies, it took 50 or 60 years for every household to have a refrigerator, and it looks like it's going to take less than a decade for smartphone penetration to get up into the 60s and 70%. So I think we're definitely seeing a new, I wouldn't call it necessarily a new paradigm, because I think the rate of innovation has been accelerating over time. And I think it poses a threat to all established organizations. One of the companies we work with is General Electric, which, if you go back to the time of inventing the light bulb, was obviously a clearly innovative company, would sort of be the Silicon Valley startup of its day. And not only did they invent the light bulb, but they invented the whole, power distribution grid. But they're an industrial company. They're one of the longest. I think they are the longest running Dow company in the Dow Jones Industrial Index. And I always look at them as a super interesting case study, because on the one hand they are they invented the light bulb. Now they're into locomotives and jet planes, jet engines, which didn't even exist at the time of their founding. And increasingly today, they're doing all sorts of things around working with startups and crowdsourcing and all these new things. So a couple of years ago, they had this. There was this commercial on TV, and it had an elephant dancing. And you think about these large, established organizations that have established, organizational structures, mainly designed to do one thing over and over and over again. And now those things are instead of playing classical music, now they have to play jazz, they have to improvise, they have to do new things. And so I think it's the accelerating rate of technological progress is a real threat to many established organizations. And I think that you have to teach the elephant to dance, so to speak, and you have to have really broad sense of what that means, because you have to be willing to let go of things that made you successful in the past to embrace things that will make you successful in the future. So I think GE is one of the ultimate companies doing that right now. They sort of won the game in the 20th century, and now they're retooling. They're selling off parts of their business, and they're getting ready to win again in the 21st century. And they just have really great continuity in their leadership, et cetera, that's allowing them to adapt to these new changes. So, so in short, I think there is a new day, if you will, around an increasing rate of innovation that is disruptive and shaking things up in the marketplace. And I think you really need enlightened leaders that can stay connected to the mission of the company, and be willing to slaughter some sacred cows to move the business forward.
Well, it's interesting because I know with Uber, obviously being in San Francisco, we all love the disruptive innovation that they're doing, and maybe not if you're a taxi driver here, yeah. But the reality is all the crowdfunding, crowdsourcing it's really something to see what's happening. And also just for the folks listening. for our first hangout, which you can find on our website at brightidea.com, there's GE, Diane, who runs the innovation program with GE. She talks all about the predictors of success and how you can have a really great innovation program, just how GE did. So I just encourage you, if you'd like to learn more, that might be a good avenue or resource to look at. So with that, let's go ahead and look for the next one. We have here Dan Gordon of Praxia. And again, if you'd like to make sure we know your company, you're welcome to put that in the question. So with Dan, he is asking what the characteristics of industries and or companies that are success factors for adoption of innovation portfolio approaches. So what are those characteristics? I think that
companies that are successful, looking at, I can't actually see Dan's question here, but I'll look for it.
Do you want me to repeat it?
No, I think I got it. So I think that, companies, there's some stats out there, and we can put it in the follow-up notes, but companies that formalize their approach to innovation are sometimes something like 2 to 3 times more likely to be successful at innovation. So it's funny when you think about it. There are companies that make software for the sales team. They call it CRM software. It's like a $18 billion market every year. So every year companies are spending, lots and lots of money on CRM software. And why are they doing that? They're doing that because sales are important to their business. They want visibility into the pipeline. They want to know how individual sales reps are contributing, and they want to know, is this deal going to close before the end of the quarter? So they're going to hit their numbers. What's funny is, innovation is really important to the business too, and not all companies are making that level of investment in managing their innovation pipeline. So how important is it that you're going to have some new products that drive growth 3 years out, or 5 years out, or 10 years out? I would argue it's pretty important. So the companies that take a structured approach to this, that really think about the process, think about how to track and manage that process, are going to be more successful. There's a quote that says, in corporate America, what is measured is treasured. So unless you have a dashboard or a pie chart or a process funnel that's showing you whether it's your sales or whether it's your innovations, unless you're looking at those things moving through the pipeline, you can see where they're getting stuck, and you can insert yourself and get things unstuck. Innovation is really hard, and if you're not paying attention to it, it's not going to just happen automatically. So I think the sort of success factors that I've seen for companies that look at their portfolio, look at their pipeline, they tend to be structured and disciplined about the innovation process itself. They tend to put full-time resources on it. Whether it's CRM or innovation pipeline management, these things don't run themselves. You need a team of people that are going to work on it. They tend to be early adopters of new technology, so they're buying tools, latest and greatest, for this specific function, and they kind of have enough experience with it that they know what they're looking for. And the portfolio management tools of the past. One of the companies I worked with previously was a company called Alianza, and we sold it to Niku, and then Niku sold it to Computer Associates. But it was basically what a piece of what Computer Associates now calls their Clarity product, which is a portfolio management tool. So we worked on that, but it was sort of heavyweight for the function of innovation. You don't want your innovation teams filling out timesheets and detailed projections and stuff like that. Traditional portfolio management. I heard this from one of our customers, and I love it. My friend Kate at Cisco, and she basically said, portfolio management is about reducing risk in a project. So if you're building a bridge, you want to plan that out, and you want to reduce the risk and come in on time and on budget. Innovation in many ways is about introducing risk. We're not throwing enough long passes. We're not taking enough risk, and we need to inject it. So I think that the tools to manage the innovation portfolio need to be sensitive to that fact. They need to be super lightweight because you have some of the best people in the company working on these projects. You don't want to bog them down with a lot of clerical or administrative duty. And you want to inject risk, not extract it. A lot of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley are constantly saying things like, would we have bet on Google? And they were, the Google founders were really, had huge egos, and they were just not that friendly people when they're out looking for money. The mistake most venture capitalists make is that they actually don't take on enough risk. They don't swing for the fences enough or big enough. And I think that's true also inside companies with their corporate innovation programs.
Well, it is interesting when you think about, innovation leaders really do have to know, when is it okay to take risk? When is it okay to have some failures, right? In order to be able to, really have success. So along those lines, I will say I have here David John Mock. And by the way, I apologize if I pronounce anyone's name incorrectly, but he's asking about how you get the right type of quality of people to drive innovation. So his specific question is, when hiring new associates, what are some questions to ask to make sure that the out-of-the-box quality is really there?
That's a great question. I think that, one of my favorite quotes is nothing succeeds like success. And it seems like a truism. It seems very basic and obvious. But anyone would want Mark Zuckerberg on their team if they were building a new startup. He's done it. He's been there. He made it happen. I think sometimes people, unless you've actually been successful, you don't know how much effort is required to actually be successful. If two people are working on a project and one goes home at 6:30 and someone else stays till 2 a.m., the one who went home at 6:30 doesn't know if the other person left at 7 or if they left at 8 or 9 or 2 or 6 a.m. the next day. They just, they don't really see that. So, nothing succeeds like success, and you're going to get hit with setbacks. You're going to get hit with Murphy's Law. You should almost expect that things are going to go wrong. But nothing succeeds like success. So I would ask people, and I do ask people, what projects have you worked on that were successful, or what projects you work on outside of work? What are your passions, which is a whole nother thread I can get into. But when someone can show you something and it's not a raw prototype, or it's not just a website that they created in a half an hour. When someone can show you something that shows sustained effort, you don't really know all the trials and tribulations they've been through, but you certainly understand that they've made it. They've gotten over the hump. They've been successful, and it just comes out. It just seeps out of the pores of the project, of the pores of the individual. So, I think I don't necessarily, ask direct questions around, lateral thinking or creativity. I just say, show me a project, talk to me about a project you've worked on. It can be in work, it can be as a side project that you've actually been successful. And I know as a hiring manager, there must have been 100 things that went wrong along the way, and they persevered through that. And therefore, there's someone who can bring new things into the world.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know here when we're interviewing folks for Who's a Fit with Brightidea, definitely love the passion some of the folks bring here for innovation, and always ask the question, will I be allowed to be able to, bring my ideas? And it's like, of course, we're an innovation company, we want them. So yeah. I love hearing about that.
Yeah, so one of our core values is the best idea has to win. And one of the people at our company basically, I think he was in his second or third week, and he's basically an intern or entry level hire. And he basically said, why don't you guys do this XYZ? It was actually, we were setting up for a town hall, and he said, why don't you guys set up the night before so it's not such a hassle? And we did it, and that was a great idea. And it's not always these big out of the box things, but you have to be ready to pivot on a dime if a better idea arises. And I think Steve Jobs had this reputation that it was his way or the highway. But actually, if you peel the onion into his story a little bit more, he was known internally as someone that if someone made a case to him that it was a better idea, he would pivot on a dime and and go with the better idea. So I think the best idea has to win, and obviously as an innovation company with idea crowdsourcing tools as our primary product, we have to live it, and we do. We use our own tools, and anyone can throw an idea to any other department in the company. And I look at the managers of those departments, and I look, are they taking the best ideas? Is the best idea winning?
Great, great. So as a reminder for the folks listening in, we're monitoring for questions on social as well as your Q&A. You can enter your questions at the bottom of your panel. So we're using hashtag innovation and hashtag leadership at Brightidea HQ. So please do submit your questions. And also what I'm going to do right now is you can vote on questions. So if you go through and you look at the questions that have been submitted, you can see which ones are the most popular. So I'm going to turn to the ones right now that really are getting the most votes. And I see Braden Kelly here. All right, hello, Braden. So Matt, the question is, do you agree with Braden Kelly's assertion that the reason most companies, pardon me for saying this, suck at innovation is that they suck at change?
Great question. Braden and I are old friends, and he's a great blogger and writer on the topic of innovation. So I would suggest anyone interested in the topic, check him out online on Twitter and on his blog. Yeah, I mean, innovation and change are two sides of the same coin, in my opinion. And I think there's obviously a lot of resistance to change. If you want to do something hard, try reallocating budget from a business unit and a business model that's been successful for 20 years. And all of a sudden you want to, extract some of their profit and put it into somewhere else. And, that's a very challenging, daunting task to do. When you have the, head of, European operations or something, and you say, you're not going to get your extra headcount because I'm going to take that budget away from you and put it into something new, that's problematic. But I think that, I think more than anything, my viewpoint is discipline is an important ingredient in this. And again, I'll go back to Steve Jobs, and he said, he was as proud of the things he said no to as the things he said yes to. And if you're just doing what makes people happy or being the nice guy, you're probably not going to get there, because there's going to be people that sort of whine and bellyache and complain about, you're taking my profits. I need to do this incremental sustaining engineering work to keep this new customer, to win this deal. And you can just hear the sort of quarterly short-term pressure, quarterly profits, et cetera. Just the cadence of that builds up. And as a leader, I think the CEO has to say, look, I'm not gonna sell ourselves short. I'm not gonna just win this quarter. I need to win this quarter and win the next decade. So I do think there's tons and tons of forces at work that that make people suck, that make organizations suck at change and suck at innovation. And I think the solution is really discipline. Discipline about the people you choose to put on these teams, discipline about pruning the innovation pipeline and being willing to kill something if it isn't going to work, and discipline about taking profits from existing lines of business and reallocating them to other lines of business. So I do believe that there's people just want to be in their comfortable pattern. I think that's changing somewhat generationally. I think the millennials are not only are they net natives, they're sort of innovation natives, that they're constantly looking for new tools and looking to do things in better ways. So I think there's a generational sea change as well. But yeah, absolutely. Innovation and change are two sides of the same coin. And it's important to look at the change management element of any of these things, in addition to looking for great new ideas that can move the company forward.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see, as innovation seems to be getting hotter and hotter, which we love, but also when we talk about discipline, many people don't associate discipline with innovation, but the reality is if you're going to fail or you're going to be able to take some risk, you have to have some discipline to do it, which can seem a little bit ironic, but absolutely, you know, that's one reason obviously we're in the platform process standpoint. So that we, oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, you know, one thing I always kind of marvel at is, you know, some of this is changing nowadays with the introduction of lean startup and stuff like that. But, you know, if you go back 5 or 7 years, you know, companies that were creating innovation teams, they were basically, you know, they had these teams of people and they'd set up sort of an innovation lab or an innovation team. And one of the things that, you know, the problem is if you read all the books on innovation, they would say innovation takes time, you know, innovation is risk, you have to fail fast, you know, and if you believed all those things, you actually created a pocket for this team of people where they really didn't have to do much for 5 or plus years because, you know, they could just go back and say innovation takes time and you have to take risks and we're failing and all this other stuff. And so I would be really careful that if you're sitting in an innovation team today, you know, ask yourself, what's my governance model? How do I prove that I'm adding value to the business? Because, you know, a lot of the rhetoric you read around innovation and, you know, there are no bad ideas and stuff like that, you know, can end up creating this insulated bubble for you where you're not beholden to the same laws of the universe and same laws of businesses as every other department. So I think there should be some room for that, but be careful if all of those things in total mean that you can just kind of mess around for a couple of years and not really deliver anything back to the business. You know, it's something you got to be careful about.
Yeah, it was interesting. In one of our last Google Hangouts, Thomson Reuters was talking all about communication. So many of the questions were coming in, you know, how do you sell, you know, your ideas internally? How do you sell the innovation program processes internally and the successes? You know, everybody was talking about, obviously you should have, you know, put a challenge in place, you know, get some successes, get quick wins. But, you know, she just kept going on about how important it was to almost over communicate, make sure people knew why you're doing what you're doing. Also making sure people understood you're not trying to do their jobs, you're not doing R&D jobs or anybody else's, you're really trying to facilitate so that for the good of the company, everybody can be more competitive so the company can be more and more a leader. And I thought that was a good message coming through there.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you're running an innovation program, an innovation team at a large organization, I mean, I would say at least 30% of your day job is internal selling, communications, alignment with the rest of the organization, you know, meshing, integrating what you're doing with what they're doing. You know, it's if you're just heads down, you know, working on a prototype or configuring software, you know, I don't recommend that as a formula for success. And some of these teams are, you know, there's so much change, there's so much turbulence. You know, candidly, some of these teams end up being endangered species. They're like the polar bear, and you know, I think it's really important to be thinking about, you know, the total business impact of your program, the dollars it costs to run the program, all in, and the outputs that the organization's getting out of the program. So it's just something to keep in mind that you know, if you're the innovation leader running that, you really need to be focused around you know, ensuring that you're you know, in good alignment with the rest of the company.
Yeah, very, very true. So Matt, you mentioned a little bit ago about lean startup, and now I'm going to go for the questions that have the most votes. So one here is, how should companies be integrating design thinking and lean startup?
Sure. Well, I wish I had a whiteboard, and those of you who know me know I love my whiteboards. But you know, just you know, to give some background, you know, I think that there are sort of three primary areas that are driving corporate innovation today. One, obviously, Brightidea does crowdsourcing tools. How do you get, you know, 10,000 people to a brainstorm instead of 10? The other two major ones are design thinking and lean startup. So, you know, when it comes to design thinking, that's people probably know companies like IDEO and Frog Design, and you sort of have these professional designers that go in and research the customer and the customer experience, and kind of ethnographic research. They take notes and they're looking for uncovered insights. They're looking for, I love the button on the ATM that just says, give me my money, I need my $200 or my $300. So, somebody was watching somebody at an ATM and they were like, oh, I have to type in 200 or 300 or, all these other options about check my balance. And really what they wanted was just a button to just say, give me my money. So, so that's sort of design thinking, the slice of the pie. And then lean startup is really around, how do I do the lowest cost experiment to prove my assumptions correct or false, and prove demand at the end of the day for what I'm thinking about building. So I love the story of Tim Ferriss, where he was trying to name his book and he wanted it to have a catchy title. So he basically put several titles on Google as AdWords, and he tested how many people clicked on each title. And I think the 4-hour work week, won. So he was like, okay, there's demand for this type of content. So what I think is interesting there in lean startup is taking a rigorous experimental apparatus. It's not, I think people are going to love this, or the marketing department wants to do this. It's how do we, at the earliest possible stages, create a structured experiment so we'll know whether we've learned if there's demand for something or not. And again, going back to the whiteboard, I think it's sort of like a three wedge pie chart, where the design thinking stuff comes at the front end, where you're looking for insights, and the lean startup stuff comes at the back end, where you're basically executing on projects. And the crowdsourcing piece comes in the middle, where you can basically use the crowdsourcing tool to extend the reach of your research efforts. So you can put it in the hands of all your salespeople or all your marketing people or even your customers, and try and glean insights that way. You still probably want a product designer who can kind of distill that stuff down. And then on the back end, you want to be tracking how many projects are moving through the pipeline. What are the experiments you're running, and what are you learning from those experiments, and recording them somewhere that everyone can see. So, I think these are the three primary trends driving corporate innovation today. I'm not really getting too deep into R&D and whatnot, which I think is subject for transformation over the next coming years. But you should at least be aware of what design thinking is, what lean startup is, and what crowdsourced innovation is, and thinking about how those domains interconnect, because I think that's sort of the state of the art right now.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, as you say, as they interconnect, but are they going to collide, or are people going to figure out how to leverage all three? So
yeah, I mean, the history of most technologies and most ideologies is that they bang into each other initially, and then they start to work together. Even Uber started making it so that you could order a taxi through their app. So it's usually not a great plan to just try and fully eradicate the way things are, or it's usually best to work well with things that are out there.
Yeah. Speaking of this, and the fact that many of the high-tech companies are in Silicon Valley, one of the questions with the most votes is Silicon Valley in a bubble? And what's your opinion on this?
Well, there's a lot of research there. There's a lot of differing opinions. I actually went through the first or the .com bubble. I think what's most instructive here is, again, I wish I had my whiteboard, but I think what's most instructive here is the Gartner hype cycle. And if you haven't seen that, just Google Gartner hype cycle. But basically Gartner is an industry IT analyst, and they look at new technologies and how they emerge, and how they're adopted into society. And one of the things they found is that you have these peaks they call it the peak of inflated expectations, where everyone says this is going to change the world, and you know, I would put like 3D printing is probably up there right now, where everyone's excited, or drones. It's just every article seems to be about drones or 3D printing. Then those benefits aren't immediately realized because it takes a long time for technology to diffuse into society. So you go through what's called the trough of disillusionment, where then everyone hates this, and everyone probably remembers somebody talking about Facebook. Oh, I hate Facebook. It's a waste of time. It's terrible. That's sort of the trough of disillusionment. And then you come up the other side, and they call it reach the plateau of productivity, where it's just become part of your life, and it's not that big of a thing. So I think that if you look at the internet, in the late 90s, we had the peak of inflated expectations that we were gonna inflation was going to stay low. We were going to have greater and greater productivity. It was this economic miracle. They were calling it the new economy. So the internet is a pretty big technology in the grand scheme of things. So that the peak of that hype cycle was off the charts. And then now I think we've come through the trough. And I remember someone telling me while I was still doing an internet startup in 2002 or 2003, they said the internet's going to go away. They said it's like CB radio. Maybe one company like eBay or something will survive, but for the most part, it's just going to go away entirely. And so that was the trough. And now I think we're actually seeing the plateau of productivity. I think you have companies like people really don't even say the word internet that much anymore. They say they use Uber. They say they use Facebook. They say they use Instagram. They say they use Pinterest. But they're not saying, I went on the internet and checked out Pinterest. They just say, I'm on Pinterest. And when something gets productive and useful, it sort of just disappears into our lifestyle, and you don't really even think about it too much. So, you look at the companies today, yes, the valuations are very large, but these companies have way more revenue than the companies had back in the bubble years ago. And I think that, if you look out, what's the future earning potential of Google over the next 5, 10, 15 years, if you're modeling that on a spreadsheet, the bulk of the earnings might come, 10 years out from now. So would that justify the valuation it has today? At the growth rates they're at, I think you can justify that. I mean, I saw something the other day that Google had 20,000 drivers in a single city in China. How much they're just going to keep going. So I think there'll be fallout. I think anytime the pendulum swings towards Silicon Valley and technology, you have room for sort of posers to sneak in, and they're not building real businesses. So there'll be fallout. I don't think anything you invest in tech is going to work. But I think the companies that are demanding real quality valuations in the market today, are real companies, and they're real revenue, real earnings, and there's a real reason to believe they're going to be around in 10 years, significantly larger than they are, generating significantly more revenue and earnings than they are today. So I think those valuations are largely justified.
Yeah, I've been impressed with how many people actually graduating this year from Stanford and Berkeley and the innovation groups have started some of their own startups that are actually great ideas. I mean, and I say that only from the standpoint of, at least as a marketer, I'm getting a lot more people reaching out from startups, and at least half of them are in this area in Silicon Valley. And they're great. They really are good ideas. They're ones that you could use. I can't leverage all of them, but I at least see more of an explosion than I did before, between the people that are graduating now and not just jumping into another, into a first company, but also wanting to branch out and start something themselves, to people with marketing ideas that are reaching out at a whole nother level than I'd seen before from very small companies. So It'll be interesting to see how things evolve.
Absolutely. I mean, it's people used to think about innovation as an R&D thing, and I would direct them to go look at how their recruiters are operating in their business, and is that the way they were operating 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when we had Monster.com, now we have LinkedIn. I mean, even something like recruiting, which you would think is the ultimate sort of person-on-person activity, you have this thing where it's like, it's the business process has been totally transformed. So I think, and marketing the same way. I mean, we're now quantifying the marketing funnel, insanely more than we were, just 5 years ago. It used to be put up a Super Bowl ad and hope people show up. And now it's, you can track every click, every conversion, every, how many times people download something, et cetera. We're in rapid transformation, and I don't anticipate that stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It's exciting to see, and we're glad we're in the space. Yeah. So for the folks that are listening in, just as a reminder, this is the AMA, Ask Me Anything. So the only way we can make this great for all of you listening is with great questions. So be sure to fill out your questions at the bottom, or you can tweet, engage in the conversation, ask any questions through social. Our hashtag today is innovation, and also hashtag leadership. Our handle is @BrightIdeaHQ. So please do ask. So one thing that one person I'd spoken to yesterday was Cristiano of Simplex, and she had asked me if you would be willing to answer a question for her. So I'm going to jump in, and because I did promise. And she had wanted to know if crowdsourcing is helping us to innovate idea collecting, what could help us innovate idea implementation?
Sure. I think it's actually Cristiano who's a man. So I've met him.
Sorry.
Down in Brazil, one of our partners. I think that there's a lot there. I would almost put it into like a 3-bucket framework. Today, tomorrow, and the future. I think that today, if you look at a company like Quirky, they're doing some interesting things around while they start. Someone has an idea, and then as they start to build the idea, they're asking the crowd, what would you pay for this? What color should it be? How should this be packaged? How should we name it? What should be the tagline? So they're really integrating the crowd throughout the development process. And oh, by the way, if you do that, you're going to have demand for your product, right? So traditionally, new product development is fraught with risk. 3 to 5% of new product launches, actually meet their original expectations. So I think that that's an important thing, and I think increasingly just pulling the crowd into that whole implementation process, as we go further out to the future. So, I think one of the beauties of Kickstarter's model is that you actually see if there's demand before you start to build the product, and it sort of harkens back to these lean startup principles. So I think anything you're doing in midstream in the process is gonna be important. And in a B2B setting, company like GE or even Brightidea, I think you're gonna have companies actually sharing early designs across the firewall, and they're gonna have key customers and lead user groups, and they're gonna say, hey, here are 5 new features we're planning on working on. Can you stack rank these? Can you tell us which are most important to you? And can you look at this early design, this prototype, and say, would this work for you? Does this make sense? Now, this goes on informally, but nowadays you have these massive user testing platforms where you can basically put something in front of 100 people instantaneously. So I think it's all about driving towards product market fit and driving towards end demand for the product. And I think you're leveraging the crowd towards those ends. So you're dissolving the firewall. You're making it less of an us versus you, or we have to have this totally complete before we reveal it to you. And you're basically saying, we're going to engage you guys in the process. Sometimes it'll be the wide open, John Q public. Sometimes it'll be these more private B2B specialized communities. But the key is to reduce the risk of what you're working on. So to identify that there's going to be demand and sand off the rough edges so that the product fits the need of the market. I think that's really how best to engage the crowd downstream in the implementation or the execution phase. We're just getting started with that. We have some tools today, but I would say we probably have 2 or 3% of the tools that will eventually deliver to our customers for supporting those downstream processes.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of talk about crowdsourcing, crowdfunding. So in a few years, it's going to be really interesting to see where things evolve. And Cristiano, I owe you a bottle of cachaça when we meet. So now that we know. Okay, so let me jump into Richard's question. Richard, thank you for submitting. And again, I encourage everyone to submit questions. The question that Richard has for us is, where is the best place to seek innovation? Is it within the walls of the organization or in the partner ecosystem, or where?
Well, let me set some preface there first, and then we can get into how to, whether it's internal or external. I think that it's important to realize that I break things down into like multiple scales of innovation. So I think you have revolutionary innovation at the top, you have evolutionary innovation in the middle, and then you have incremental innovation at the bottom. And then of course there's different types of innovation vertically, like product innovation versus process innovation. So it's really hard to offer a blanket statement around all of those things because the processes you use, the people that are involved, the way the decisions get made are fundamentally different in each of those little squares of that matrix that I just walked through. So I do think that there's a place for internal innovation and external innovation, or internal ideas, external ideas. And I'll give a couple examples. One of our customers is SAP. They run Brightidea. If you go to ideas.sap.com, you can see their public portal. And basically, they have 1,000 web storms running to collect ideas for new features. So SAP obviously has a big software company. They've got a lot of different products. And basically, they have a place to catch suggestions and feature enhancement requests for each of those products. So, they're obviously looking outside the company. A flip side on the inside the company for incremental stuff is you might be on the factory floor. You might be looking at little tweaks that can be made to the production process. And for there, you're going to want to look inside the company. As you move up to sort of mid-range innovation, I tend to think this is best done internally. Maybe you go and you want to solve a problem that the company has, a pressing challenge, like, if you're a cable company and you're losing subscribers, like, how do we solve that problem? I think you're going to be better off doing that inside the company in that middle tier. And then at the high tier, really game changer innovation. Again, I think you have a sort of bicameral model where you have internal and external. So internal would be your corporate venturing department, strategic innovation process, or corporate R&D lab. External would be doing open innovation. So looking for ideas that are outside the company that can be a game changer, ideas or technologies. So, if you look at Apple, when they invented the iPhone, everyone's like, Apple's a great innovator, et cetera. But they actually sourced the 2-point touch screen from outside the company. So they went and they found this professor and a small 2-person team, and they licensed that technology for the 2-point touch screen. And then that obviously was a pretty amazing achievement to get into the original iPhone. So I think that you have to kind of break things down. Are you talking about product versus process innovation? Or are you talking about very large, medium or small size innovation? And then working with someone who knows their stuff, they'll be able to direct you to, should you go internal, should you go external? I think long term you're going to have this sort of comprehensive platform. Right now, companies may be only doing 1 or 2 or 3 of those things, but eventually you're going to have this universal platform for innovation. And whether you want to, you might run you might try and solve a problem internally, and if you've done an exhaustive search internally and you can't find it, then you might want to go out on the grid and look for open innovation technologies that can solve your problem. So, like many questions in innovation, no easy, quick, precise answer. But I think certainly when it comes to crowdsourcing and collaborative innovation technology, you're going to want to chat with whoever you're working with and say, this is what I'm trying to do. This is the scale of innovation we're trying to do. We're doing product innovation, and then that person can direct you to how best to set yourself up for success.
Matt, along the lines of trying to reach various people, I love your story about mobile and why people need mobile and what's going to be happening as more and more people leverage mobile with their innovation programs. Could you just talk on that for a moment?
Sure. I think, let me see if I have a slide here on it. I can't guarantee that I do, but I will check. Mobile. No, I guess I don't have it. So, you know, the story with mobile that I think is amazing is, you know, we're talking about you know, the arc of PCs really only coming to 1 or 2 billion you know, PCs you know, sold per year or every 2 years, and then mobile is going to go to 4 billion. So if you thought there were a lot of people connected to the internet in 2005, the smartphone is basically turning that whole thing upside down, and you're going to have 4 billion people. So you know, I think that's hard for people to wrap their head around, that you know, twice as many people are going to be online, and not only they're going to be online where they're going to go through AOL through a dial-up modem, but they're going to be instantaneously addressable. So you know, you basically come in and you say, you know, today, you know, our customers can send a notification from their software, and it can go out to 10,000 people, and those people pick up those notifications in under 3 minutes. So, you know, the fact that there's going to be 4 billion people addressable in real time to solve a problem. I love going back to this, the oil spill that BP had in the Gulf. And, you know, what if we could just light up all of our engineers in the whole country, you know, and say, anyone have any ideas on how to solve this, and gather that input, gather that feedback. You know, that's like a whole nother level of infrastructure that just doesn't really exist today. So I think mobile is a massive trend. We're leaning in on it in terms of the tools we're building around the Brightidea product. And you know, I think people can only really you know, grapple at what capabilities that's going to give us when you can start, you know, one of our missions at Brightidea is to or the mission is to make innovation as you know, instantaneous as electricity. So, you know, you have a problem inside your company like this oil spill, and like you just flip a switch, and like you start getting solutions just flowing towards you, and you start looking at what are good ones and sifting them and synthesizing answers. So so, you know, imagine a world where you're doing that inside your company. You know, you can talk to every engineer in the company in 3 minutes and see if they have feedback for a problem. Or if that's not sufficient, you can go out to networks of people in academia, networks of people, of entrepreneurs and inventors, and you can basically pull them into the process. You know, that's the promise of this mobile revolution, this sort of instantaneous, real-time touch point to the people you want to speak to. And, you know, compare that to where we are today, where if 8 people are in a room and one person's talking, no one else can talk at the same time because it just creates this crosstalk. You know, that's fundamentally, we're in a whole new ballgame there if we can tap, you know, 10,000, 100,000 people in real time. So I'm super excited about what those opportunities bring. I think the ideas and insights that come along are, you know, they sort of come out there in the wild. You know, there's this guy who makes these little notebooks called field notes, and I carry them around with me when I go on a trip, and I'm not going to have my mobile with me. And basically you know, some of the best insights come when you're out taking a hike or you're out taking a walk. And you know, the fact that we're getting closer to that moment of insight, closer to that moment of being in the field and seeing what's actually going on, I think we're just going to see a massive acceleration in innovation from that alone.
That makes sense. So we just have a few minutes left. So I'm going to ask, depending on how long the answers are, I'll ask 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll do a summary wrap. So right now, I just want to make sure if there's any questions that people want to make sure have high votes, that you go and vote right now, because that's really how we're prioritizing. We do have one question here, though, from Dennis that I would like to ask. Social unrest has been garnering more coverage lately. There are many, but Baltimore locally, I'm sure I'm reading that wrong, but let me try this one more time. basically what he's trying to say is there's sit-ins and different things that are happening that come to mind with social unrest. Okay, so the question is there an intersection that's applying innovation or helping social leaders use innovation to better address and possibly mitigate flare-ups like we've seen recently? So how can innovation play a role in possibly social to help with these social unrest?
Well, it's a great question. I think that, you know, the subtext to all of this is that we're connecting the world, and we just talked about the 4 billion smartphones that are coming. So the reason protests happen is when people go into the street, they see that other people share the same grievances. If you all sit in your home and kind of just kick the dog, you know, nobody knows that you're as frustrated as they are, and that there could be a movement. And so people go out into these squares and they protest. I actually saw something on Tiananmen Square just last night. I was watching on TV, and you know, and those people come out and they see each other. What's changed since the time of Tiananmen Square is people can see each other even in their own house. So you know, these movements can get a spark and take fire a lot more quickly. And I think that, so that's the subtext. And typically when a new technology comes along, there are two sides to the coin. There's a positive side and negative side. You know, you can build nuclear weapons or you can build nuclear energy. And I think where the technology can add value, or innovation can add value, is to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem, to light a candle instead of curse the darkness. And you know, everyone I've worked with in innovation tends to be very optimistic and positive. And I think the more they can pull people into that mindset, the better. So you know, I think these flare-ups, if you will, I actually think I think of one of our customers right now, Carrie, who's down. She's the Chief Innovation Officer at the city of Austin, Texas, and they're actually running a hackathon right now. And I just love that. I mean, it just makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck, because, you know, they're not waiting until people get ticked off or they're frustrated. You know, they're saying, come be part of the solution. You know, come help us. You know, we're open. You know, we're opening the kimono. You know, help us. You know, get what you want out of government. And you know, there's a lot of government bashing that goes on these days. And you know, we need government, we need streets, we need traffic lights. These things are good in general. There's some waste, and I'll admit that. But I think what you can do if you look at the other side of this coin, is use these same technologies that people are using to organize and motivate, and use them for good. And I think that's, you know, what Kerry's doing and others. And what that has the potential to do is it's kind of like burning out the underbrush, so to reduce the fire hazard. You know, it's actually good to have a small fire every once in a while, so that you don't have a really big fire at some point. So I think the combination of letting people voice their concerns, and then also becoming part of the solution, is really key. And I think, again, these technologies have two sides to them. And you know, I think if you're facing that stuff, you're probably not being open in some other way, that this is just a symptom of that, because those people can see more than they could ever see before. So my recommendation to the leaders of the land would be, you know, engage people to be part of the solution, instead of part of the problem.
No, that sounds great. Thank you, Matt. This has been very, very informative. We do have a few more questions, but they're from folks that I see we know, like Sandra. So Sandra, we will get back to you. Right now we're at the top of the hour. So I'd really like to thank Matt very, very much for sharing his valuable insights on innovation and, frankly, everything else that you talked about. It was very, very informative. And thank you, everyone, for participating and for your questions. We invite you to visit www.brightidea.com on our website for free resources and to learn more about Brightidea and, frankly, how we can partner with you along your innovation journey. So we'd love to hear from you. We thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time and for the great questions, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.